Thinking about selling your home as is because you don't want to deal with the repairs. And honestly, that's where almost every as is decision starts. It's not complicated. It's not strategic at first. It's usually just you don't want to go through the process of fixing things, coordinating work, spending more money, or delaying the sale. You're looking at the property and thinking, I'd rather just sell it the way it is and move on. And that's completely valid. But what most sellers expect from as is and what you actually get once you hit the market are two very different things. Because as is doesn't remove the conversation around condition. It just changes where and how that conversation happens. A lot of sellers go into it thinking that as is means buyers will walk in, accept everything as they see it, and move forward without questions. But buyers don't think that way. Even in an as-is deal, buyers are still trying to understand what they're buying. They're still evaluating risk. They're still asking themselves, what could this cost me later? So the first thing that still happens almost every time is inspection. And inspection is where reality starts to come into play. Because no matter how the property is listed, once a buyer has it under contract, they're going to look closely. They'll bring in inspectors. They'll review systems, structure, roof, plumbing, electrical, all of it. And once that information is in front of them, it influences how they feel about the deal. This is where a lot of sellers get caught off guard because they thought as is means those conversations wouldn't come up, but they do. They just come up later instead of earlier. Instead of fixing those things before listing, now you're discussing them after the inspection. And that changes the dynamic. Now you're in a position where the buyer has more information than they did at the beginning, and they're deciding how to respond to it. Sometimes they move forward without asking for anything. Sometimes they come back with requests. Sometimes they try to renegotiate. And sometimes they walk away. Instead of fixing things before listing, now you're discussing them after inspection. And that changes the dynamic. Now you're in a position where the buyer has more information than they did at the beginning. And they're deciding how to respond to it. Sometimes they move forward without asking for anything. Sometimes they come back with requests. Sometimes they try to renegotiate. And sometimes they walk away entirely. So as is doesn't eliminate negotiation. It delays it. And in some cases, it actually concentrates it into a more critical moment in the deal. Now, this doesn't mean as is a bad strategy. In fact, when it's used correctly, it can work really well. But the key is understanding that it's not about avoiding the condition of the home. It's about aligning expectations with reality from the beginning. Pricing plays a big role in this. When a home is listed as is, buyers are automatically trying to interpret what that means. They're asking themselves, is this price to reflect the condition, or is this price like a move-in ready home but labeled as is? If there's a disconnect there, hesitation starts to build. Buyers become more cautious. They assume there are hidden issues. They start protecting themselves before they even see the property. And that affects how they approach the offer or whether they make one at all. On the other hand, when the pricing and presentation are aligned, something different happens. Buyers understand the opportunity. They know what they're walking into. And instead of feeling uncertain, they feel like they're making a calculated decision. That's where as is becomes a positioning tool, not just a convenience. Another layer to this is the emotional side of it. For sellers, choosing as is often feels like a way to simplify things. But when negotiations come back after inspection, it can feel frustrating because in your mind, you already decided not to deal with repairs. So when those conversations resurface, it feels like you're being pulled back into something you were trying to avoid. That's where expectations matter. Because if you go into it understanding that those conversations are likely to happen, they don't feel like a problem. They just feel like part of the process. And you're better prepared to respond to them calmly and strategically. There's also a perception element on the buyer side. The phrase as is can mean different things to different people. Some buyers see it as an opportunity. Others see it as a warning. And you don't always control which interpretation they bring into the situation. That's why how the property is presented matters just as much as how it's labeled. Clean, well-maintained homes that are sold as is feel very different from homes that look neglected or uncertain, even if both are technically being sold the same way. Buyers are reacting to what they see, not just what they read. And another thing to consider is the type of buyer you're attracting. As is properties often bring in investors, flippers, or buyers who are comfortable taking on projects. But that doesn't mean you're limited to that group. There are also buyers who simply prefer to handle updates themselves rather than pay for someone else's version of finished. So the audience is still broad, but how they evaluate the deal is slightly different. They're thinking more in terms of numbers, flexibility, and potential. And that's where clarity becomes your biggest advantage. The clearer the situation feels, the stronger your position is. At the end of the day, as is not about avoiding responsibility. It's about choosing where you want that responsibility to sit in the process, before the sale or during the negotiation. And when you understand that shift, it stops feeling like a shortcut. It starts feeling like a deliberate strategy, because the goal isn't just to sell the home, it's to control how the conversation around it happens. And when that's done right, as is can be one of the most effective ways to do it.